Okay, inverse assemblers. I had to split this part out to a separate video because what a rabbit hole. So I just freshly restarted my logic analyzer and hooked up a remote X connection here just to make it easier to film. So for the inverse assemblers, it's very finicky and there's many ways to mess up. The files that start with a C are your analyzer configuration files, so you're going to need this. And the underscore I would be when you use one of the special hardware interfaces that sort of pre-cook some of the control signals, or the underscore P is for general purpose probing, like what you're most likely going to be doing. So here's the difference. The text file, I think, was produced automatically from either the R file or the config file, so it tells you what you're going to have to hook up. These assignments aren't final, you can modify them. And you're also going to need the file that starts with the letter I, which is for the inverse assembler itself. Note, you may also encounter a file with a .r extension, and that, as far as I understand, is the compiled and relocatable program of your inverse assembly. This is compiled code. You can see the header, it's got a bunch of stuff there. But the file you're going to be sending to the logic analyzer is this file, which is, you can recognize this part here, with an HFS LIF file header. I think if you use the IALDOWN script, either the Python port, or you can even do it manually, the analyzer will add the header. If you plan on using FTP, then you need the file without the extension that already has the LIF header. And just a side note here, that IAL download script, it opens a telnet connection. Well, it uses telnet even though it's not an actual telnet server, and it offers you a couple options. These are documented in the HP manuals. This depends on the inverse assembler you're using. The core thing that it does is it sends this SCPI command. So it's a memory download. Internal 0 is, I think, the hard drive. And this flag, -15614, is documented in the programmer's guide. And there's a table here, so -15614 is the inverse assembler. And I believe going through this and specifying this field makes sure that the file contents ended up with a proper HFS header. Now, I find it more convenient to use an FTP client to transfer files, for example FileZilla. So I have these pre-configured. There's a control and a data user. You want usually the data user. There's no password, server type, I didn't touch that. You want active mode, and you want to limit the number of connections. Character set, I didn't touch that. But the very, very, very important part of this is before you transfer the inverse assembler files, if you just send this over, it's not going to work. The reason is up here, transfer type. It's usually an automatic, which is fine, except that somewhere in your options, transfers, FTP file types, treat files without extension as ASCII file. You have to uncheck that, because otherwise it mangles the carriage return and line feed characters. Took me a bit to figure that out. It's pretty obvious now in retrospect, but that's always how it is. Of course, if you want the full 1993 experience, but you don't want to bust out the floppy drives, then you can just go to your FTP client and connect, and no password. Then you gotta figure out how to set passive mode. Oops. Okay, that works, and then you also want to set binary mode. I don't know how to do that, but yeah, you can do it this way too. Those are the two key things, no passive mode and binary mode. If you have active mode enabled, then you're going to do this, you're going to do ls, and it tries to, well yeah, it tells you right away, it doesn't work. 8088, can we do that? Okay, so this one I don't expect that it'll work because it didn't have an HFS header. And the logic analyzer has no way of knowing that this is an inverse assembler. If I pick, let's say this file, which I know has the HFS header, 86 should work. And I'm going to pick a configuration file. Let's try that, the NSC one again. Okay, alright, so I got all the one of each. Okay, if I just scroll, that'll trigger a reread the directory. So the first thing happens, it thinks they're all DOS files because they came through FTP. Sometimes if you move out of the directory and back again, okay, sometimes it recognizes them. Let's try, if I try to load the .r file into all. No configurations loaded. And okay, there's no inverse assembler. Okay, let's go back. That's good. Well, good. I didn't expect that one to work. Let's try the other one that should have an HFS header. I'm gonna move back in here, and okay, so maybe just moving out of the menu and back in again made it recognize this file. But anyway, it read the proper header now, and it's got the right type. And I think I should be able to do this. And now I should have 8086 in here. 8086, yes. Never mind this. That's just a config name, the machine name. So that worked. Let's go back in here. And for some reason now, it managed to figure out this was a config. So I guess it's just flaky. You gotta mess around, go back out and in again. And now I think it should work. If I load this NSC config, it's going to be all weird, but... Right, so it's associated with its own inverse assembler. That association is part of the config file, that's fine. It probably still set some... Yeah, it set the machine name. It probably set some of the symbols. I don't know what the NSC... Yeah, I don't know. This is probably good. Ideally, you want to use a pre-made config file because it does all the tedious stuff of entering labels and such. If you can't do that for any reason, you can still load an inverse assembler, but there's a few hard requirements. Of course, you need to set up a machine for state analysis. Now the inverse assembler loaded fine now. But if you just do that, well, you probably won't have anything in the listing. That's because some labels are hard requirements for all inverse assemblers. First, you need address, and I believe this is all case sensitive. You also need data and state. Not only does it need the proper name, they also need to be enabled with at least one signal each, otherwise they automatically get turned off. Once you have all those set up, then in the listing view, for the data field, instead of hex, you can pick inverse assembler there, and everything should be usable now. And it looks funky because I'm missing some of the control lines for the processor. So the reset vector is not going to disassemble properly because you're still not running code yet until you hit this, and this is most likely proper code. It's always weird to read because what you're seeing are the fetches on the bus. So for this function call, this is a good example. The inverse assembler saw a load here. I don't know, a write. I don't know what that write is. I think it could be just because the 68K is pipeline, so this could be part of the previous thing. So anyway, it's not easy to figure out what's going on, but it's still kind of working. And that's how I managed to get inverse assemblers to work.